Welcome to session number 8, tutorial number 2. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about change management theories. So if you just look at today's world, the time has changed a lot. The days when people held one job for all or most of their working life are gone. The average person changes jobs 10-15 times during their career. This equates to approximately 11 job changes. Why? What are the reasons for change? Why do organizations need to change? What are the drivers for change? These are some of the things that you need to be aware as a project manager or a project team. The forces for change. There are many things that force change in an organization, such as the nature of the workforce, technology, economic shocks, competition, social trends, and world politics. All these things can introduce different changes to your organization. When these changes are introduced to your organization or project environment, as a project manager, you will need to own it and manage the changes effectively. Organizations often face change that is unexpected and sudden, but it can also be a purposeful decision that organizations undertake. There are ways to foster an environment that is able to adapt and change with the demands of the marketplace. Planned change is engaging in activities that are proactive and purposeful to improve the ability of the organization to handle change and to change employee behavior. Through this process, change agents, those acting as leaders in the change process, are essential for successfully achieving the desired change. Now let's have a look at what is a change. A change is an alteration of an organization's environment, structure, technology, or people. A few examples would be introducing a new process, change the location of the office, changing the working hours for the employees. Planning would be simplified if tomorrow would be same as today. But often that's not the case. It's a mandatory requirement to respond to the changes timely and appropriately. In traditional project management world, it's very strict. If you look at the entire project development life cycle, the room that is left and kept for change management is very, very minimal. The approach the traditional management suggests to manage the changes, cope up with the changes, is through change request. However, we put a lot of emphasis to finalize the requirements before we proceed. Sealing the requirements. As we go on the development, the room for accommodating change is very, very minimal. However, in agile approaches, the whole focus is on responding to changes. Through inspection and adoption, through shorter iterations, it allows the teams to try out something, and in case of a change, that change can easily be accommodated than in a traditional project environment. While we're talking about the changes, it would simplify the manager's job if the following conditions are true. competitors did not introduce new products or services, or if customers didn't make new demands. What if government regulations were never modified? If technology never advanced? Or if employees' needs always remain the same? Coping up with temporariness. With the changes, it has introduced a constantly changing environment and situations. Globalization has expanded capacity, and advances in technology have combined in recent years to make it imperative that organizations be fast and flexible if they are to survive. The result is that most managers and employees today work in a climate best characterized as temporary. Evidence is everywhere. Jobs are being continually redesigned. Tasks are increasingly being done by flexible teams rather than by individuals. Companies are relying more on temporary workers. Jobs are being subcontracted out to other firms, and pensions are being redesigned to move with people as they change jobs. All these things have created a very changing environment, making it more challenging the project management teams to manage the projects effectively. When you look at the organizational development perspective, the planned change programs of the 1970s were quite rigid, fixed in their views. However, the current perspective has moved to a more flexible approach. It remains experimental and forward-looking, but above all, it has become more aware of behavioral dynamics of people and the organizations that influence change. As organizations change by flattening hierarchies, downsizing and delayering, the responsibility for change management was passed down the line to middle managers, supervisors, and team leaders. Agile goes further, talking about self-empowered teams, self-leadership, where we empower the teams and individuals to make certain decisions in terms of coping up with the changes. Now let's have a look at various approaches to change. During the past 20 years, the idea of managing change has become part of the received wisdom of turbulent environments and has often emerged through commercial programs such as total quality management or business process reengineering. As a result, a series of change initiatives has emerged that has tended to borrow fragments of the OD approach. Let's study one of the famous models widely used by the project management teams and organizations, Levin's three-stage model. Change management has often been likened to that of a journey. Levin's designed a model for change which is in three stages, namely unfreeze, change, refreeze. This model reflects the essence of the traditional OD approach, through which a clear goal or destination is identified and cascaded to the organization's members. It takes a very linear approach and assumes that the process will be neat and tight. Lewin offers a three-step model to help facilitate the change process. He sets forth that change efforts need to unfreeze individual resistance and group conformity to help them move forward, and then you need to refreeze the changes by balancing driving and restraining forces. This will help to move people through the change process and solidify the desired behaviors or outcomes moving forward. In the unfreezing stage, Lewin identifies driving and restraining forces. Driving forces are those that direct behavior away from status quo. Restraining forces are those that hinder movement from the existing balance. So when a change is introduced, there will be a set of people who are resistant towards adapting to the changing situation. At the same time, there can be people who are more reception and welcoming those changes. Kotter also offers a model to look at change that builds on the initial ideas of Lewin. He sets the following 8 steps, which are primarily based on the 3 stages proposed by Lewin, which are unfreezing, movement, and refreezing. Let's have a look at what these 8 steps proposed by Kotter are. Step number 1, establish a sense of urgency. According to Kotter, it's important that you establish an urgency within your teams. The people need to understand why these changes are being implemented, how urgent these changes are. The second, form a coalition. Bring them into a common ground. Let them understand the reasoning behind it, the steps involved. Third, create a new vision. While we are targeting on tactical, small changes within the project environment, it will be essential that you communicate the vision. In order for you to communicate the vision, you need to establish a vision. Possibly, the leadership together with the key stakeholders can come up with a vision that makes sense for the given changing situation. Once it is established, the next step is to communicate the vision effectively. Let the people know what is the big picture in implementing the given change. Most of the teams overlook this area. They focus on narrowed tactical set of changes, whereas the teams and people might not be aware of the big picture of the change implementation. Step number 5, empower others by removing barriers. It's important that you help the teams and the individuals to navigate through the changing situation. Adapting to a changing situation, implementing a change might not be an easy task. Therefore, as a leader, your involvement to empower them is absolutely critical. Step number 6, create and reward short-term wins. While we are focusing on big strategic goals, it's important that you target achieving short-term quick wins. These quick wins will let the teams feel that they are progressing, they are making incremental progress. The step number 7 is consolidate, releases, and adjust. This is a key step where you execute what you have been planning. Looking at the small task changes, try to consolidate them, group them up to releases. There can be quite a few changes bundled together where you call it a release and then release it. Once it's released, then the next step is to look at the results and adjust your approach. So the next time you introduce a set of changes, introduce adjusted changes. The last step is reinforce the changes. It's absolutely essential that you retain the good practices. You reinforce the same changes in the coming weeks, months, and years. In managing changes, it's important that you are clear about the roles and responsibilities. The change process and its diagnosis should involve a joint relationship between the consultant, which could be external, or the change agent, which is usually internal, and various other stakeholders in the organization. This enables the problem to be understood from multiple perspectives. The alternative is to allow the consultant or change agent to be seen as the expert, whose role is to identify task-related changes. Culture. The culture of the organization affects hugely on the change implementation. According to Greaves in 2008, there are essentially two ways to view culture. Culture as an analytical device or as a variable to be managed. As a change agent, this is not a black or white area. There is a need to focus on discourse, which is a critical skill of a change agent. Understand that situations are ambiguous and uncertain and in a constant state of flux. While you're implementing, one thing you may observe is that there is a lot of resistance to change. The resistance to change could be passive or active. It's been said that most people hate any change that doesn't jingle in their pockets. Why do people resist to changes? One thing is the uncertainty. When people are not certain why a particular change is introduced, they tend to resist. Concern over personal loss. One of the other challenges that you need to manage is the interpretation of a changing situation. Mostly when there is any change introduced, people start with their circle of concern. They are more concerned than influence. So be aware of it, and then your job as a leader is to move the people and the teams from their circle of concerns to the circle of influence. Bring in the right facts, arguments, and logic. The belief that the change is not in the organization's best interest. When the people or the teams don't understand the reasoning behind any particular changing situation or change implementation, they tend to believe that this is not what the organization is interested of. Whenever change is present, there is resistance to change. Individuals and groups become comfortable with things that are familiar, and change threatens the status quo. There are different ways that change is resisted by employees. It can be overt or immediate, where complaints are voiced and people will fail to engage in job actions or perform negative actions that hinder productivity. It can also be implicit and deferred, when employees lose their loyalty and their motivation. As the resistance is deferred, it becomes more difficult to find the link between the source and the reaction. There are many sources of resistance to change, as seen in the visual in this slide. It can take the form of individual resistance, such as habit, security, economic factors, fear of unknown, selective information processing, or organizational resistance, such as structural inertia, limited focus of change, threat to expertise, threat to established power relationships, and threat to established resource allocations, etc. When managers face resistance to change, there are some useful tactics they can utilize to help people overcome it. These tactics include education and communication, getting people to participate in the process, and building support and commitment. It can also include being sure to implement the change fairly by applying a consistent and fair process, using manipulation and cooperation to spin the message to gain cooperation, or selecting people from the beginning who are more willing to accept change. Finally, a manager can resort to persuade, using direct threats and force to make people change. This is not often a good option and should only be used if that's the only option left. Let's have a look at the techniques for reducing resistance. When you observe that people and the teams are more resistive towards a change, following techniques can be used. Here we are discussing 3 different techniques to be used in different situations. Technique number 1, education and communication. When resistance is due to misinformation, this is a good technique. The advantage over the education and communication is it clears up misunderstanding of the people. The disadvantage of this method would be it may not work where mutual trust and credibility are lacking. The second technique that you may use is participation. When we can use this is when resistors have the expertise to make a contribution. You make them part of the change. The advantages of this particular technique is it increases involvement and acceptance. However, the disadvantage would be time consuming, has potential for poor solution. The third technique is facilitation and support. When you could use this is when resistors are fearful and anxiety ridden. By using this, the advantage you gain is it can facilitate needed adjustments. However, the challenge you face might be this is mostly expensive. No guarantee of success. Let's have a look at few more techniques for reducing resistance. The fourth technique that we are discussing is negotiation. Negotiation is necessary when resistance comes from a powerful group. When negotiation is used, we can buy commitment. However, the disadvantages of negotiation is potentially high cost. Opens doors for others to apply pressure too, because you get the other people involved. The next technique that we are going to discuss is manipulation and cooperation. This is particularly useful when a powerful group's endorsement is needed. The advantage of this particular technique is it is usually inexpensive, easy way to gain support. However, the disadvantage would be it can backfire, causing the change agent to lose credibility. The next technique is forcing a change. When a powerful group's endorsement is needed, this is pretty much effective. The advantage over this particular approach is it's inexpensive as well, and it is easy way to gain support. However, the disadvantage would be it is illegal, may undermine change agents' credibility, and also it can frustrate the teams and people since you are forcing a change to persuade the decision. Change includes many political factors as the impetus for change is likely to come from outside those who are responsible for making the change happen. This can threaten those change agents within the organization and force them to implement incremental but not radical change. Embedded in the change dynamics will be the issue of power. Power struggles will have results that determine the speed and quality of the change. Failed change programs. Unfortunately, the vast majority of improvement initiatives undertaken by organizations, even with the best intentions, are destined to have the little impact, with success rates in some industries as low as 10%. Now let's have a look at why change implementations are failing. There can be many reasons. Out of these reasons, one of the key reasons why these change implementations may fail is lack of vision and commitment from the senior management. It's absolutely critical that senior management define a vision and communicate that to the project teams prior implementing a change. Also, some level of commitment needs to present from senior management. Second, limited integration with other systems and processes in the organization. While you are trying to implement a change within your project context, it's important to understand the relationships between your change with the rest, with the other systems. If there are direct links, if there are dependencies, you need to manage these dependencies and integrate those into your changes. The third, ill-conceived implementation plans. Again, one of the major reasons why the change implementation may fail is due to the poor planning. So while you're coming up with a steady plan, it's important that you invest your time and effort continuously throughout the change implementation. Possibly coming up with adaptive plans regularly will fix this issue. The method of intervention, cascaded top-down information flows through layers of managers, resulting in problems of understanding and commitment. So when you have very metrics-based organizations or functional organizations, the bureaucracy hierarchy of the organization structure may itself become a problem to implement the right changes. While implementing changes, you need to ensure that what the leaders communicate is what is ended at the teams and individuals. Organizational development. Organizational development is a collection of planned interventions built on humanistic democratic values that seeks to improve organizational effectiveness and employee well-being. Organizational development values respect for people, trust and support, power equalization, confrontation, and participation. Many organizations attempt to create a culture for change through encouraging innovation. There are many sources of innovation or the process of coming up with a new idea that helps to improve a current process, product or service. Innovation can occur through structural variables, long-tenured management, limitations in resources, or increased communication between units. For innovation to occur, there needs to be an ideal champion who actively promotes the innovation. Learning is another key component of creating a culture for change. A learning organization is one that has developed the continuous capacity to adapt and change. Learning organizations share some common characteristics such as sharing the same vision, getting rid of old ways of working, viewing the organization as a system of relationships, open communication, and working together to achieve a shared vision. To create a learning organization, managers must overcome some traditional organizational problems such as fragmentation, competition, and reactiveness. Learning can be managed by establishing a strategy that everybody understands and can buy into. Redesigning the organization structure to increase communication and interactions and reshaping the organization's culture to reward risk-taking and good mistakes will help to increase the effectiveness of the learning activities.